think we're going to get started here. Really appreciate everybody coming. And we can learn a little bit about something we've been working on for a long time, identity assurance. So my name is Ann West. I am the Senior Director for InCommon Partnerships and Research, and am really excited to have with me Ashraf Ahmed, who's their Director of Identity and Access Management for National Institutes of Health. We've been working, if you were in the last session, you'll know that we've been working with NIH for many, many years on helping to roll out new capabilities in the Federation to be able to address additional and new security requirements that they have. This is no exception, except that we've been working on identity assurance for probably 15 years as a community. Those of you who remember InCommon Silver and Bronze, I worked on those. Yes, thank you very much for the person in the back. I worked on those many, many years ago, and am super excited to be seeing that there are other options now, and we will be talking through that. Without further ado, you don't want to hear from me. You want to hear from this man here, Ashraf.
Thank you, everyone. My name is Ashraf. Sorry, we had some mix up with the slides, so we started a little late, but I'll try to hurry up so Ann can speak again. Work for NIH. NIH is National Institutes of Health. And within NIH, I work for, there are 27 ICs, institutes and centers within NIH, and I work for the Center for Information Technology. We provide enterprise IT services for all of NIH. And within that, the Identity and Access Management Service is an enterprise capability that's provided to all of NIH for both internal users, the workforce, as well as our external users, and most of those are researchers. So bottom line up front, the reason why I'm here today is because NIH is improving security of its CADRs. CADRs are Controlled Access Data Repositories by requiring higher levels of identity assurance. So the other requirement there is all of these CADRs need to integrate with researcher Auth service, which is a customized solution to access controlled data. So there are two requirements, identity assurance requirement, as well as integrating with RAS. So today I'm here to announce more of, I think Ann actually hinted that already, is that NIH is accepting IAP High as IAL2 to meet these requirements, which is a good news, and it's never happened before. So we'll go through the details in the next few slides. So identity proofing and identity assurance, they're similar concepts, but different. And so for today's topic, it's important to distinguish between the two. So identity proofing is the process of verifying someone's real world identity. And assurance is the level of confidence in the actual proofing itself. Right? So higher the proofing, improved proofing improves your identity assurance. Again, you may already know this, but NIST has standards for identity assurance levels, IAL1 being the lowest and IAL3 being the highest. So IAL1 is pretty much no verification. It's kind of like when you get a ticket for a train or a bus. You're a person, you pay for it, you get the ticket. You could be pretty much anyone. IAL2 is high confidence, remote or in-person proofing. One form of government identification is required, similar to all of us who probably traveled from, traveled via plane. They require either your driver's license or a passport, right? And they verify that before you enter the plane. IAL3 requires in-person proofing, two forms of government identification, and biometric capture, similar to international global entry, where you go through that process. So it's a very high-level overview of the assurance levels that NIST has set. Similarly, REFEDS IAP has different levels. We have low, medium, and high. And this is not my slide. I need to give credit to Kyle for his artistry. So it's very comparable to IEL at some level, and we'll go through that. So IAP low is you're just a person, you need a credential, the credential is given. So in the second one, talks about I am Jason, I like an account, I have an ID card, could be any card. That card is verified, may or may not be authentic. But in the third one, IAP high, Jason says, I like an account, I have an ID card, see it's not expired, it looks like me, it has a hologram to prevent forgery, and has a unique number with date of birth, address, and uniquely for that identity. Go ahead and check it out. And so the verifier checks the hologram, makes sure it's current, picture looks like that person, number on the card matches the record on some authoritative source. So the third one, IAP high, is very comparable to IEL2 that NIST has sent. Just to pivot a little bit, I think again, Ann highlighted this a little bit, just going back to history, starting in 2022, NIH worked with the community to implement federated MFA and identity assurance standards because those federal requirements were coming. And in 2021, ERA, which is NIH's grants management solution, required MFA. And that was done through login.gov, and they were also the first to accept federated MFA. And my predecessor, Jeff Erickson, worked with all of you to meet that requirement by the deadline. And in 2023, we continued to expand to require federated MFA for non-ERA applications. And here we are today with more requirements, this time focused on the identity assurance levels. So we partnered with Internet2, they've been great, and your community, the community itself has delivered, and what we're asking for your support again. I talked about RAS, the Researcher Auth Service, so I thought it would be good to just provide an overview of how that system works. So in this case, RAS is used for authenticating CADRs, right? So a researcher goes to the partner portal, which is integrated through RAS, right? And RAS itself, there's two things. It does authorization as well as authentication. So on the authorization side, it complies with GA4GH standards for health data exchange. It had some other capability like identity linking and auditing. And then it leverages its data source, or in this case is a virtual directory, which gets its data from authoritative data source, which is dbGaP, for authorization. It's more of the passport and visa system. With the passport, you get access, but you're not authorized to access the data until you have the visa for that particular data set. From an authentication perspective, we leverage our enterprise authentication solution, which is NIH Login, for both the internal IDPs as well as the external federated IDPs. In this case, it shows login.gov. It provides single sign-on capabilities, so if users accessing multiple CADRs, right, they get seamless sign-on to those CADRs. So that's more conceptually how the process works. From a system perspective, we leverage Broadcom's API gateway for that broker that you see in the middle there. And then on the NIH login side, that is powered by Broadcom's SiteMinder solution. We are in the process of modernizing that solution. We're moving to a two-vendor solution, Entra ID for our internal workforce, and then Okta for our external users. So that change or that modernization is happening in parallel. And lastly, the VDS, we rely on Reading Logic's virtual directory solution. All right. So since we were talking about RAS, now that NIH considers IAP High from InCommon as comparable to IAL2, in addition to login.gov and IDMe, InCommon would be listed as an approved IDP. And so you see on the screenshot on the right that lists those, and that's a mock-up. This is not in production quite yet. Specifically from a requirements perspective, this is what's required is listed here: REFEDS Assurance Framework version 2, assert the conformance, version 2, and the IAP high signal. MFA profile is still required, as well as the user attributes. And I'm not a REFEDS expert, but Kyle is. Raise your hand, Kyle, and he has a session later on this afternoon if you want details regarding the REFEDS framework. Why this matters? So firstly, I think it's user experience. We want users to be able to use their university credentials to access CADRs, right? Without going through another proofing process, which is time-consuming, and it's intrusive. You have to provide documents. The other thing is we have gaps in the proofing international users. Currently, only ID.me supports international users, and even for that requires a live session. In addition to that, it's time-consuming, and the failure rate is generally pretty high. So it's better, right, from a user perspective, to use the credential that they already have. Again, underscoring the importance of being able to meet the IAP high requirement for you. Obviously, we have additional identity assurance, so that is improved security and privacy of this sensitive NIH biomedical data. And lastly, it says eliminate, but it's more reduction of cost incurred by federal agencies like NIH. ID.me and login.gov charge NIH, and they charge a good amount, right? Several dollars for the proofing process, right? And then there's additional costs every time you authenticate using login.gov or ID.me. So we save on that cost, and this is a federal agency, so it's all our tax dollars. So it's very important that we cut costs or reduce costs where we can. So what do you need to do? Again, I think Ann highlighted this a little bit, where this is not just a IT issue, or opportunity, I should say, that you need to collaborate with your leadership. It says IT, but it's also business leadership, to assess your current process and identify where changes need to be made, right, in order to get to IAP high. Participate in technical readiness. NIH has developed a tool so you can check the readiness, right, the MFA profile, the IAP signals, etc. Fortunately, we have our technical lead over here, Sandeep. Sorry, raise your hand in case you have any questions with the testing tool itself. We're happy to help. I know Internet 2 will be doing the same. And the target is to, for you to do those testing, do that assessment, and report back to Internet 2 and InCommon on the readiness, and then they can figure out how to help moving forward. So as you get ready, support, again, the REFEDS MFA profile. That's been the requirement. That'll continue to expand. That need is going to continue to expand as we require MFA for more and more applications. Support the REFEDS assurance framework. And then, again, encourage InCommon enabled campus SSO. Like I said, from a user experience, it's much better for them. Right, they see the ID.me or login option, right? They click on it and they go through the proofing process, which is not necessary in this case. So some kind of campaign encouragement is required. So as far as next steps, as I said, start prepping now, participate in the readiness testing with the tool that we have. I know Albert has another similar tool, so a combination of those can help. You have to meet these requirements by January 2027. That's our goal. It's very aggressive for us. We have about 50 or so CADRs that we need to integrate with RAS by 2027. We have the funding for it. We have the resources, and it's a matter of doing it. So your support is needed. And then provide a list of universities that access NIH CADRs. That's on us to do. We are working with our Office of Data Science to collect that information so we can identify all of the universities that access these CADRs. So again, don't wait, start now, but you don't have to do all of this on your own. Internet 2 is here to help. And with that, I will turn it over to Ann. And then we'll take questions afterwards.
Okay. Yep. So thanks for the background, Ashrab. As you can tell, it's pretty exciting. What I'm going to do is talk a little bit about how we're working with NIH and you all to help address not only the NIH access to controlled data repositories, but also some issues you might have at home. So NIH isn't alone, right? You all have likely issues on your campuses with a number of different use cases. Student financial aid fraud, ghost students. We've talked to community colleges that have had folks essentially apply to school because they allow anyone to get in and then leverage that email address for spamming reasons, right? So what would help with that? Well, maybe identity proofing might help with some of that. Physical access to buildings, labs or other facilities, and making sure the right people with the right access, which of course all of you work on, are able to do what they need to do. Contacting campus help or service desk. Someone calls and wants to reset their password. How do you know the person on the other end is the actual person in this time of deep fakes and AI? You really don't. Even if they're on Zoom and showing their ID, how do you really know? You really don't. And then, of course, requirement of external systems, accessing using campus credentials, similar to what NIH is doing. But we have paychecks, right? Folks phishing, and not necessarily phishing, but taking over and essentially diverting paychecks. I mean, there are many use cases. So what we thought about is what NIH is looking for is identity assurance that maps back to identity proofing by the IDP. But the IDP, the campus, has much broader need for identity proofing than just accessing the National Institutes of Health services. Not that that's an insignificant thing, but there's a much broader need. So we thought, what the heck? Let's go fishing. Let's go fishing with an F, right? And see what kind of needs other folks might have across the community. So we issued a survey in September and October called the Identity Verification and Fraud Prevention Survey. Many of you may have filled this out. We pushed it out to both InCommon, Internet 2, as well as EDUCAUSE security and identity and leadership lists. And we found a bunch of things. We had a pretty good showing. We had about little less than 200 folks fill it out. A significant number, 25% were CIOs, roughly the same CISOs, and then we had a number of identity implementers and so forth fill this out. So it was a really interesting kind of cross-section. So what's surprising? Departments, a lot of this identity proofing is done in silos. It's not centralized. And maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it's not a good thing. The identity proofing that, say, a help desk might need to reset a password is really different than, say, what HR might use to do an I-9 process. So some of this is, okay, yeah, you can see where there might be different processes, might be different tools that are used in these different use cases. Get that. Many, well, over half of the campuses surveyed already had some identity proofing somewhere. But they weren't, they were essentially acknowledging that it wasn't necessarily good enough to address all the various use cases. We also heard that not a lot of the schools have a centralized kind of repository to track these identity proofing events. And why is that important? Well, if you come in as an I-9, as a new employee, that's an identity proofing event. And then maybe you have to assert it to NIH. Someone has to check to make sure, is this person been identity proofed? And if so, be able to verify that and pass the necessary, essentially just assurance attribute to NIH to verify to NIH that this person's been identity proofed. You also might need it for access to campus card. You might need an identity proofing process there. So the piece is, how centralized can identity proofing kind of system be that sort of tracks and can be leveraged for the multiple different needs to express assurance, right? If that makes sense. In addition to what kind of point solutions are needed, because this particular event is really, really different. What we did here is an enormous number of the community are looking at corporate solutions. And that makes tons of sense in this time of AI and deepfakes. It's really, really tough to do really good IIL2 identity assurance level, NIST identity assurance level 2 identity proofing on your own with the current tools that we have at our disposal. So I am super, well, I'll talk about that later, but we have Kevin mentioned NetPlus in the previous session. We've been engaging NetPlus about what this could mean. Everyone's evaluating vendors separately, duplicating effort, but it was really, really clear that campuses want to learn from each other and find out what solutions are out there, not only for the corporate side, but when do you do identity proofing to both reduce your costs, but then protect and address your risk? So here's what we put together. We basically have an internet-wide effort to work with you all on identity proofing processes, because that's a key piece to engage the business units about, but then also the technology and, of course, the Federation interop to make sure that the signaling happens with key valuable service providers like National Institutes of Health. So the first thing we want to do is, Rami mentioned about the accelerators. We want to build an accelerator to help you walk through identity proofing. Kyle Lewis, you've heard his name several times, and another contractor of ours, Tom Barton, put together an implementation guidance for the REFEDS assurance standard. So we're going to be riffing on that. That's already published out there, by the way. We'll be riffing on that and leveraging that to put together an accelerator to help you kind of walk through that and share your ideas with your peer institutions. We don't have a specific program, so this is all going to be throwing a lot of really smart people together to help you move forward until we can collectively, as a community, gain enough experience to then document that and share that out with others. So it's both a discovery and an iterative process that will lead, if you participate in it, helping others with your ideas and solutions. So the second piece is the Federation signaling and interop. So obviously documenting, Albert's done a great job starting the Get NIH Ready wiki page that, for those of you who participated in the MFA work before, will know it's the same URL. So we have that underway, as well as maybe a configuration video for Shibboleth for those who would like just some quick ideas about how do I configure this signaling, both for MFA and assurance. and then working with Catalyst and Catalyst Bridge providers to support these requirements. So the third thing that I'm super excited to talk about is we're doing a Net Plus RFP and service evaluation for a federally approved identity proofing solution provider. We are fast tracking that in a big way, and I want to thank my colleague Sean O'Brien, the AVP for Net Plus, for supporting this. And why are we fast tracking it? It's because NIH has a deadline of January 2027 to basically have identity proofing in place, the business processes in place, as well as the technical signaling through the Federation to make that happen. That seems like a long way away. It is not. So we're fast tracking the Net Plus RFP and service evaluation so that those campuses that have users of controlled access data repositories will have time to do the integration, testing, and rollout of this product if this is something that makes sense to them. So not on this slide, but is new because we talked about it just yesterday, we are looking for 5 to 7 campuses that will spend the time to help us with this RFP. Likely going to start in January to review the RFP that we have underway and then issue it and review the responses. So I want to point out Nick Lewis. I saw him earlier. Stand up, Nick, please. Nick Lewis is the lead for this RFP and service evaluation process. If you all are interested in participating in it, please, please, please stop by and talk to Nick or talk to me because we have to identify these schools right away. One school that may be in scope, and I'm looking at you, Rob Carter, because of the work you're already doing with evaluations and review of services, for instance, Duke might be a wonderful campus to engage. So I see you nodding, but let's talk. So next steps in discussion. There's a couple of sessions today. Kyle will be talking about demystifying the REFEDS assurance framework today at 1:40. There's also, I think, a session probably going on now. Well, when's your session, David? Okay, so David and crew, the Community Trust and Assurance Board will be talking about broader assurance needs and other things that the Community Trust and Assurance Board, they are sort of the keepers of assurance and campus practices to support these types of things. And he'll be talking about that at 10:15. We will likely also have an advanced camp session at the end of the week. I think Nick and I will be leading something both around the Net Plus service providing offer, as well as questions about what you might need for an accelerator for identity proofing. If you're staying for advanced camp, please help us run up to the board and put the sticky tag up there and with a session. You don't have to help us do that. We can do that, but please join us. And then there's the checkout the Get NIH Ready Wiki. That's what the QR code is. That leads to just the early kind of, these are the requirements that NIH has. Here's how you signal it across the Federation. And stay tuned for more in the new year. Before I close and we go to questions, I just want to acknowledge a few folks in the audience. Clearly, we've talked about Kyle Lewis. We also would be remiss without talking about Chris Whalen, who was instrumental in helping NIH with the acceptance of InCommon as a trust framework provider as a whole, as well as then the REFEDS standards, and Matthew Economou, who's essentially the developer of the testing tool that I mentioned earlier for federal agencies to be able to test how this signaling works in a federation. Those 3 people are all associated with RDCT, one of our very valuable Catalyst partners, and work with federal agencies on exploring and adopting InCommon Federation. So I want to thank a big shout out to those folks. So with that, Here's what I think we're trying to achieve from an internet use perspective, and I don't want to put words in Ashraf's mouth, but it does help the federal agencies writ large. We're trying to mobilize a community effort to not only support, a key federal requirement coming out of a very valuable service provider in the Federation, but we're also trying to build sustainable identity assurance capabilities for the community to leverage for itself. Once we have these things able to be signaled in the Federation and supported by the business processes, you can then offer valuable services to each other that have these higher security requirements. For instance, sharing data repositories between campuses, but leveraging MFA as well as identity assurance. That's incredibly powerful. And then the third thing is obviously helping you address broader, urgent, local fraud concerns by understanding and implementing good identity proofing and related practices. So I think that's all the slides we have for today, and I want to open it up for questions. No, you're good.
Is there a reason why you decided to go with two vendor IDs, NIST and Auth, in your system rather than using something like Microsoft Authenticators? Sure, I can answer that. So we collected requirements from all of our ICs. As I said, we have 27 ICs, and then we assessed various products. We already own Microsoft G5 licenses, and the authentication solution, Entra ID, is included in there, right? So it's very compelling from a financial perspective, but it did not meet some of the requirements that we have, right? One of them was support for header-based authentication for external users, right? And then the other one was the InCommon integration, actually, right? And so we've mentioned that to Microsoft, but they weren't able to deliver it in time, right? They pointed us to another third party who would develop that capability for them, and we didn't want to go that route. And so for that reason, we went with Okta for our external users. Now, Okta, it will be protecting all external-facing applications, but they would also support our internal workforce, right? It'll be protecting those applications. If it's an internal user, it redirects it to Entra ID for authentication. It delegates that authentication.
Hi, yeah, I'm Corey Snavely from Berkeley Lab, and so I wanted to thank you and everyone that's involved at the NIH for kind of being a driver for some of these standards, because they're very helpful to us in the federal space, as I think they're helpful to kind of advancing things for the general community as well. The question I wanted to ask, and maybe this is like so practical as to be ANCAMP material, but some of the tools when they encounter a service provider that has some of these additional requirements don't always handle them in the best way. And so we have sort of practical issues like MFA step up and some navigational pitfalls and stuff that browsers experience when they've been, happily, you're authenticated enough for Gmail, but suddenly you hit this higher bar. And so I just wondered if investigating some of those navigational pitfalls and some of this uplift kind of stuff that needs protocol support are you considering that to be kind of part of your project? Is that something that you're looking at? Does my question make sense? Should we talk later, et cetera?
I think so. Step-up authentication is a capability that we have. We are further enhancing, right, within our environment. And I think over time we'll improve it. We're adding additional capabilities, including identity linking you saw up there. That is being developed as well, where you've gone through proofing process. You have a credential, yet you also have another one, right, to be able, if it's proofed at the same level, to be able to leverage each one, right? But then there are questions, right, as to how often do you need to renew? How often do you need to re-authenticate using that original credential, right? Things like that. So it gets fairly complex, but those are in our roadmap, and some of them are actively being developed.
And I have a question. You said the institutions who want to participate in the RFP process to come see you, is there a special time or place that they can find you?
Well, I'll be at the InCommon kind of area probably tomorrow at break time, but anytime, just grab Nick or Nick or me. I see Steve Zoppi in the back. I have to do my grammar checking. So it would be, we have to identify 3 to 5 schools by next week. Let's put it that way. So it's very, very fast deadline to be able to, again, move this fast enough to hit the NIH deadline.
Does everybody know where the InCommon demo area is? Have you seen the big orange wall as you're meandering about? Look for the big orange wall. That's where all the things are happening.
There you go.
Oh, Nick.
Hi, Nick Lewis, Internet 2. So how many of you are working on identity proofing on your campuses right now? Like, do you have active projects going on around this? A couple, 1, 2, 3 out of like 50-ish people? That seems like a small number. How about like help desk fraud? Like, how do you do the identity proofing when somebody needs a password reset and they call your help desk? Are you looking at improving those processes? Just webcam using the card.
Card, yeah, that's pretty much where it's at.
But that just doesn't scale though. So, okay, so if there's a couple people definitely want to talk to you, please stop by.
I was hoping you would ask a question, Martin.
Oh, yeah, yeah, maybe a bit of provocative, but I was also wondering, I mean, on one hand, we tried with Identity Federations, try to get in researchers more and more that they, for instance, can access NIH resources. What we also learned from FIM4R last Sunday, it's Tuesday today, right, yeah, a bit jet-lagged, was that sometimes support for research in universities, especially on central IT, is for all reasons limited. So, and I know also from the European side of view, and for instance, my neighbor also knows it quite good, that doing identity assurance on a scale is hard, and especially give it that most of the times it's just a few researchers who need to access these services, whereas the university have to do a lots of work and they feel that as a burden, although in the end, on top, of course, it's enabling the next Nobel Prize winner, as Paul would say. So I'm just wondering from the rest of the audience, especially the ones who from our former campus, how do they see that, and are they really going to do this? Because probably in the end, if you have a good stick that you can't get access, probably people will, but I just want to get a feeling on others here in the audience, if they have some opinions on what we heard from FIM4R, like, well, yeah, it's nice, but we don't have time for it.
Right. Thoughts about that? So Martin's basically summarizing our federated identity management for research session on Sunday, where we talk about the increasing bifurcation of research and central IT and the support of research. So this is primarily a research use case, right? Access to controlled access data repositories. And so he's rightly asking, and we did the same, why would institutions support this? What's driving you?
One thought is when the researcher is applying for an NIH grant and the research requires access to the Controlled Access Data Repository, should the cost of the identity proofing be part of the budget for that grant proposal?
Yeah, so sort of helping, in a way, the campus pay for the identity proofing that NIH is enjoying. Yep. Interesting idea.
Yeah, I'm a bit curious, but what part of the cost do you mean? Do you mean the cost to identify the particular researcher, or the cost of creating the whole infrastructure to identify any researcher? Because once you have that base cost, then the following cost for each researcher will be minimal. Applying for like $2 of worth of a grant from NIH seems a bit strange.
Yeah, I think it takes a lot more to support the infrastructure. Just my opinion, I would think it's an infrastructure cost. It's not just the per cost or a per fee to do the identity proofing. But I mean, I think it's a great question. Other ideas about why would somebody implement this for access to data repositories?
Sorry. Well, I think the sort of killer feature here would be that if every single research infrastructure and data repository and what you name it would require the same identity proofing, then it would be impossible to do anything without having this. That would be putting the pressure on the IT department, because right now, like if you have people who are doing research in an HPC in Europe and they want to access, say, the Loomis supercomputer, for a single IDP, they may have a handful of researchers, 5 to 10, of a staff of 5,000. Of course, they are not going to do anything to cater to the needs of those 5. Yep. But if every single research infrastructure have this demand, which is a good idea, then the pressure would be on.
Yep, so broader uses, broader needs than just repositories. Yep.
I'll just say from a NIH perspective, we are expected to broaden that. Currently it's 50 CADRs, right? Because from an authorization perspective, we rely on one authoritative source for authorization data, right? That's a mouthful. But we are planning to expand that, right, to integrate with additional authorization repositories, right? And so that those 50 will expand over time.
Two things to add on. One, we're talking about CADRs right now, and that comes back to a FSMA moderate requirement for IL2. And I think, first of all, thank you, Ashraf, for landing the plane on this one and getting this accepted for RAF High. That's a huge amount of benefit for the community. But one thing the community should remember is, if you're reading the tea leaves looking ahead, we don't know whether the government will start to require the same protections for other equally sensitive systems. FSMA moderate is the default for all research, not just for CADRs. So there's a lot of FSMA moderate systems that have this not been levied for yet. But I would expect in the future the demand for increased security to continue, and also to get to the point of difficulty to implement RAF with the different universities. While some of that might be true, I think some of that's, at least in the U.S. context, a little bit of fear, uncertainty, and doubt. I think you'll find that there are cases where you're already doing the thing. You just need to make the claim. And we're going to get into some of those details in the session this afternoon.
We have time for one more question. All right. Ooh.
I just have a question about the ID proofing, and how does the ID proofing tie into user lifecycle? If, for example, the user role change, and how often you're going to do, like, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's oh, go ahead, Kyle. Yeah.
I'm coming. People can hear you. I know.
So the identity proofing itself is not necessarily tied to roles. It is a statement of a one-time event when the account is created and issued. You preserve the assurance through other means like multi-factor authentication and protecting the account.
Yeah, so I just want to close a little bit with Martin's question. So why would folks implement this? And I think the way we're trying to target this is that identity proofing is here to stay. Actually, the controlled access data repositories are a great way to work on a smaller, likely a smaller use case to figure out how you're going to make that better. Right? How are you going to do identity proofing that hits the NIST identity assurance level 2? So while we're using REFEDS as the standard, the NetPlus service provider, solutions provider, will be a Kantara approved federal agency accepting identity proofing solution. So you'll be able to use it in other compliance, more strict compliance situations where NIST is required. So I think we're trying to broaden out and show how identity proofing can help with fraud writ large that we know folks are actually seeing. And we're leveraging the mandate from National Institutes of Health to drive attention, to drive value, to drive an example, and to drive this additional capability writ large across the Federation. So I just want to close with saying thank you for joining. Happy and would love to talk to each and every one of you about this project because I think it's super exciting. And make sure you talk to Nick about participating. Yay! In the NetPlus RFP and service evaluation. We're looking for a few good people to help us with that. So enjoy the rest of your conference and make sure you catch Kyle's and David's presentation that takes a different flavor of the same thing later today. Thanks very much.